Welcome to Art Bazaar, a podcast that chats with artists of all types to explore the depths of creativity. Brought to you by the Alternative Gallery. We'll be releasing new episodes every Wednesday with bonus episodes dropping randomly. If you like what you're hearing, you can support this podcast by going to thealternativegallery.com and clicking on the podcast tab. I'm your host, Brandon Wonder, creative director of the Alternative Gallery, a non-profit arts organization in Allentown, PA, run through the efforts of dedicated volunteers. On this episode of Art Bazaar, we're chatting with Colin Wolf, a local musician and music educator from the Lehigh Valley. Colin fronts the band Smooth Retsina Glow as both singer and guitar player. You can check out their music by going to smoothretsinaglow.com. This weekend, Colin hosts as well as performs in a show here at the Alternative Gallery on Saturday, April 13th, featuring Fysics, Roy and the Secret People, Cnidarian and Smooth Retsina Glow, of course. Colin, hello. Welcome to the Art Bazaar.
Hey, Brandon. Good to see you.
You too, buddy. Thanks for coming out to chat about everything you got going on today. Why don't you tell me about your band, Smooth Retsina Glow, maybe kind of how it started? Because I know musically that band is kind of all over the place. So I'm curious on how you describe it, maybe as far as a genre or multi-genres, and what you consider it to be.
Okay, so we're now going into our fifth year as a name. It's definitely been a long, strange trip, surviving a pandemic and lineup changes, and we're currently going into our fifth one. We're just, if any bass players who needs a job, we have an open vacancy, and I'll get to that a bit. So initially it metamorphosized out of a previous band I was playing out of back in 2019 with two older musicians who I'm still in varying degrees of communication with, and Retsina is a wine, and there's a Steely Dan song with a line Smooth Retsina from Asia, if anyone remembers that record.
Okay.
Naming everything from groups to my parents' cat, Asia, funny enough.
Okay.
My parents have a cat named Asia they've just taken on, and she's
That reminds
awesome.
me, by the way, just as a quick aside here, my friend has a theory with Chinese and Asian restaurants that the more generic the name, the better the food.
Yeah.
And there is, in fact, one here. It's near Bethlehem, near Fountain Hill. It's just called Asia, and apparently it's incredible. So just a little tidbit there.
Oh, I should check it out sometime. I always enjoy that cuisine. And we put out our first record back in November of 2019, and it did fairly well, but it was much more of a folk rock or like boomer blues. And there were a couple moments that on the first record that were, I think, a little more indicative of where I wanted to go musically, but I think it was a bit of a generational clash. And then, of course, COVID hits, and the two other guys and basically just stepped down because, hey, it was dangerous enough going out, especially if you're above 60 and even for our age and whatever else. But I have their blessing. I did see our first female singer at a show a couple months ago in KU when we were doing an acoustic gig, and she seemed to enjoy it. I don't know if she liked the change in music because we only do one song from that first record, which we will be doing live at the gig. Got through 2020 relatively unscathed, did a lot of outdoor gigs, and it was a good character sort of building experience at the time, and we put out a second record, which was virtually done, and it was just the way that we had to do it.
And that one you played most of the instruments on, I believe I read.
Yeah.
Everything but drums?
Everything about drums. I think just about the first record I did all, and the second, but generally all the overdubs you hear on any of our tracks is me, apart from bass on our third and fourth records. We had another co-singer then, and they went off and did, I think, a year in Arizona or something like that. Then it was just a trio from, this is about 21 to 22, and it was pretty good, but I always missed having an extra vocalist because some people might be able to handle those lengthy stints, but for me, especially considering we were starting to gig more and more, it was becoming a little more fatiguing, and then our bass player unfortunately got a little compromised.
Yeah, because you play multiple gigs most weeks.
Yeah, this week we're doing 4. Last week was only 1, which was fine enough for me.
A little bit of a break.
It was a good, well-earned break, and rather than get upset for not gigging, I figured I'm just going to chill, and I'm going to enjoy it.
Well, especially now you got spring and summer, you're going to be, one gig after the next. It's going to be nonstop.
For the most part. With the shows, I'm also trying to book at venues that I know are going to be more appreciative of doing originals, because covers only gets you so far, and I also want to play venues that occasionally you have to take chances with the first night, but it's like I know it's probably going to be a good evening. Like the Grog House is one, Pearly Baker's is another that are actually pretty receptive to bands doing original music. So that sort of is my mindset as I fill in those holes. So then we brought back our very first bass player, who was a former student of mine, Jacob Wolf, and we did our last record, most current, I should say.
Most current, yeah.
Yes, more on that later. And it was definitely the best marketed and the best promoted, because with our singles process, a lot that I learned over the past couple of years was how to release it and where to send it to. And also, I finally figured out how to send MP3s, which was like a big game changer for me, because even though I've always respected the use of technology for music and promotion, it's always been a bit of my Achilles, and I finally figured out, okay, here's the MP3, you attach it, and then you send it off to the radio station and hope for the best. And we got a lot of traction, not just here, but we got radio airplay in Australia and Japan and a lot of places in Europe. And it takes persistence, I'm just going to tell you that. And of course, you will get the door slammed in your face occasionally. That's just how it is in this career field. And then we put our record out, but there was quite a few issues with the lineup at the time for reasons that I really shouldn't get into too much detail over, because it's just not important to dwell on the negatives right now.
Sure.
And the whole lineup basically disintegrated. So it was just yours truly and a name and whoever I could get to fill the gigs. But so far in the past couple months, we've had a good rebranding of the name, and I think the new guys that we've got working are definitely the best ones so far. For drums now, we have Quincy Willen, who I met through a mutual contact of ours. I think you sort of know from the first couple interactions how things are going to be, and he's one of the few musicians who wants to do a Zappa song live. So we finally learned Dancin' Fool at his request, and we'll be breaking it in this week for the covers gigs.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's also a good challenge in all respects, because if anyone knows that song, there's quite a few odd time parts, and it's also very compositionally oriented, where not 1-2 section of the song is exactly the same. And a couple months ago, because we were still looking for our co-singer, I was asked to participate in a benefit for my first guitar teacher, Matt Roman, or Roman, if anybody remembers a punk band called the FUX.
Matt's a great guy. What's the name of that band?
The FUX?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, so great story about it there. So I've known Roman since I was 8, because my dad and he went to high school together way back when. This was when the FUX were really going overseas a lot. They had to G-rate their name to the file under X, because I was asking my mother, what does fucks mean? And eventually you put 2 and 2 together, but
as you said, it became very obvious.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was like at 8 years old, I grew up fast when you say with someone like Roman. But he unfortunately has Parkinson's, and he's been in a bit of a hard fight. So we had a benefit at the Ice House to raise support, which I was more than happy to do, because you have to give back to your, especially if you have a teacher who is very integral in your development, you don't always get that opportunity to give back. Really just honored that they asked me to do it. So we did it as a trio format. Obviously, I stayed after because I just wanted to hear all the groups, and it was really fun hearing everybody in action.
Yeah, and then you were there to support your buddy.
Oh, yep. Couldn't have been more honored.
Yeah, he's played quite a few gigs here over the years. He used to do the summer solstice shows with some of the bands that he grew up with at that time. One of them being the Trendsetters.
Yep. They actually played there, and that actually segues it to the next part. So anybody who knows who works with me as my business knows that I'm pretty on top about getting my bookings, and I think I've learned how to dial it back a little bit over the years. But I can be persistent, and this one lady comes up to me and goes, "Oh, you're in the band Smooth Retsina Glow." And I said, "Yeah." And it's like, "You know what that is?" I'm like, "Of course. It's a Mediterranean wine." She says, "Who is the bot that you have that messages Just Jake's restaurant in Coopersburg every week?" And it's like, "That's me." And she's like, "That's you?" And it's like, "Yeah, I don't even know how to work a bot."
She accused you of being a bot?
Because she insinuated,
That's funny, by the way. Have you heard the dead internet theory that's like resurfacing?
No.
It started in like 2016, 2017. Just as a real quick aside before you go any further, since you mentioned bots, because it has a lot to do with what we need to utilize social media for. But back then there was a theory that the internet was mostly bots at this point, that were higher numbers than actual human users, and that these bots were intentionally interfering with the algorithms and changing basically what most people were seeing, and that very few things were having any kind of organic reach. And now in the last couple of years, it's starting to really come up again. And now we're starting to see how bad it is with bots out there. And
I think the bots are also a lot more prevalent and
Correct.
a lot more lethal than they ever were back in 2016.
especially now with AI in the mix.
Yeah, that's very...
But that was funny. You got accused of being a bot, and here you are just recently found out how to attach an MP3.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even know how to work it. So, but but actually, hold the thought on bots, because her daughter then comes up to us, up to me rather, and I think she might have seen us perform, and she was talking about, I'm coming back to this area a little bit because I want to focus on my music career. I'm saying, I just happen to have a vacancy. Let's talk. We're discussing more music over Insta. And she says, oh, do you know who Frank Zappa is? I'm like, oh, please, do I know? It's like, I mean, is it really that bad that somebody would think to ask another, like, younger-minded individual, do you know who Zappa was? And it's like, of
Not
course.
a lot of people know Zappa now.
Oh, my God.
They don't.
Goodness gracious.
I'm sorry to tell you that, man. I love Zappa. I thought he was brilliant, not just musically.
Oh, yeah, he was just too smart for this world.
Everything he says, you go back and watch old YouTube videos
so
of him getting into it, ripping back in the late 70s and early 80s, telling people that, the United States government's problem is they're trying to make it into a religious theocracy.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's precisely where we are right now in this country. He knew what was up.
Oh, yeah, he did. He did indeed.
But unfortunately, people don't pay attention because there's not commercial value to a person like Frank Zappa.
I think he even was saying back in the 80s he wouldn't get a deal if he was in the 80s. Imagine what it would be like then.
Correct. Yeah, he was way too avant-garde for pop culture, and he just somehow had enough shine to break through, leave his mark, and so few like him will ever be able to do so and reach those heights. So, I mean, more power to him.
There'll never quite be anyone like Frank.
No.
I mean, Dweezil, I did see Zappa play Zappa for my grad present back
Yeah, that's
in
where his son
2015.
performs, right?
And Dweezil is, you have to give him credit for keeping his dad's legacy alive.
Absolutely.
And he's a great musician.
It's a family business now.
He's done the most to keep his dad's legacy going. But at the same time, Frank was just his own entity when it came to writing and arranging and all the stuff that he did and all the ground
And he
that
died
covered.
so young. It was like 54?
52, yeah.
52?
No, well, yeah, I should know this.
But it's like, think of all the guys that get to live 70, 80, 90 years old that do nothing with the time. And then you hear how a guy and he was so prolific too.
I
mean,
thinking
it's
about this the other
exhausting to
day.
look through his discography because there's so much on it. It's like the Melvins. There's just so much.
Yeah. Oh, another great group that needs more attention, and they're still doing stuff as far as I'm aware. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think Buzz had one side project from a couple of years ago. I was just looking at Premier Guitar's website when they actually showed newer articles to see if there was anything I missed, because it was sort of like we were talking about earlier, where I was saying how you become aware of things in hindsight a little bit, and it's like, I'll check this out again and hopefully it'll stick, because there's nothing.
But why do you think that is? Something that you initially hear you think isn't good, but later you realize, like, oh my God, this is great. Like, what is that? Is that you maybe were in the wrong mindset, or maybe you needed to learn more and you weren't into that thing yet? What do you think? Because I experienced
Good question.
that too.
You know, it's I'm trying to think of something like that's happened recently.
Like, there's been specific movies for me I watch, and I'm like, that movie's terrible. And then I go back and watch it later. I'm like, this is brilliant. Why didn't I understand this to begin with? Like, there's been certain movies where I just wasn't really paying attention while watching it, like kind of doing something else. But there's movies that I actually gave my attention to and just didn't get the first time. Now, maybe this is part of it. I know with movies, at least, a lot of movies you got to watch twice to have an honest opinion of. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what it is. Sometimes it doesn't stick the first listen or the first experience.
I'm trying to think of. I'll give you an example. So, 27. One of the things that Premier Guitar, the site, helped me discover was King Gizzard, who are historically one of
and
my
the
favorite
Lizard
groups.
Wizard.
Oh yeah,
Another fun name.
another very prolific group. So, one of the things that you might know is they did 5 records in 2017, and they got the last one out New Year's Eve, and they had 4 other records, which, I mean, all the power to them for being able to do that. I wouldn't try to compete with it, because I think that they were just cut out to do that. And I think part of the reason is they usually have a very high standard of how they release their records, and they're all unique in their own different way, that they, especially for me, like I would get really into one record, and then a few of the other ones. Like, I think the one of the 5 that I really enjoyed the most was Gumboot Soup, possibly just for the stylistic continuity, but I also thought it was just brilliant how they got it out at New Year's Eve.
Just at the last possible second.
2017 has said, we have fulfilled our 5 album quota, because they were kind of towing the line of a bit about going between 4 or 5, and then they got it out New Year's Eve, and it's like, whoa.
Do they overdub, or is it like kind of like live recordings?
I think it's all done live. I mean, they did 3 records virtually during the pandemic.
Yeah,
of course,
obviously that's a lot quicker to do it that way than overdubs.
As a general rule, I think live recording is the best way to go, because you're in the room with the person.
Yeah, you're playing off each other.
And sometimes that can get lost, especially when you're doing...
one instrument at a time.
Yeah, I mean, for 2020 and 21, okay, fine. But at the same time, some people are able to, or have been able, thanks to automation, for better or for worse, to make it sound like you're in the room. But I think more and more people will be able to tell when something's in the room and when it's recorded.
Yeah.
I should also say that, especially for our albums, I also love the ability to overdub, because we certainly can get some great works when you're using the studio as an
it's a
instrument
great
like
tool.
Sgt. Pepper.
But it also makes it harder to perform it live like that.
Quite true. That's why the Beatles stopped performing live. You know, like the George Martin approach of using the studio as an instrument is...
Take it too far.
We've just about done everything as far as technology is concerned. That's, at least for now. Hopefully that'll change.
Well,
someday.
in general, it is interesting that every time there's kind of a new technological leap, it creates new, sometimes mediums of art, but at least new ways to create within existing mediums.
Yeah, you know, it's just fate, I guess. I really don't know, because it's like you can give anybody I don't want to say that the most expensive guitar, because that's bullshit, honestly. You can get by with anything. You can give anyone a perfectly intonated guitar, because like no matter how well in terms of quality a guitar is constructed or a piece of equipment, you have to be able to set it up properly.
If you're not using it right, what's the point?
But at the same time, you also have to make sure that as far as being able to create something, I wouldn't know the first thing about how to tell somebody how to be creative. It's like you don't have a course in that.
Oh, there's that. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to explore all the different ways you can be creative.
I mean, I think.
But now,
for
do
me,
you think artists get too? Do you think musicians get too caught up in the tech, in the gear?
Some guitar players certainly. Certainly guitar players, you know, you see this all the time where like companies put out new effects, and a lot of them are just variations on the same thing. It's like give the kids recipes to make lager or sangria or
I've
red
seen
wine.
like 4 foot wide foot pedal boards here.
Yeah, and
It's crazy.
you know, first of all, gear is a personal choice.
Yes.
You can
go minimal or go all out.
Yeah, and you know, there are great recordings that have lots of processors, and there's recordings that's just guitar and amp, and it just depends on the circumstance.
I think for the sake of being creative, though,
You have to have that, though.
you should be able to do it minimally. Like, just to get the core, just to understand, be able to connect the most directly with what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, and there's no rules, of course. I'm not saying people have to do it this way, but I like the idea of doing it minimally, because then it also, at the same time, it helps you understand as you implement all these other pieces.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes maybe, you know, I come from more the filmmaking world, but filmmakers and photographers are terrible when it comes to gear. If your camera is more than 2 or 3 years old, you have a piece of crap camera. Like, you need to have the most innovative piece of tech that's out there right now and competing with whoever else is putting this stuff out. And it's like, no, can you even frame a shot? Like, that's what's more important than what piece of gear you have. It's like you were saying, you could have a cheap guitar and still do your thing.
Yeah, and for me personally, like I think I've found the way that I have my setup currently to have the minimal amount of boxes to do the maximum amount of things, because let's be honest, overdrive is overdrive. You know, it's like all these people have like, they'll seek out the most obscure boutique drive or fuzz, and I'm not saying don't explore that, but for me it's also about finding what works for you or myself, because I know that there's certain sorts of effects or textures that when you hit it, it'll sound like it's on. And the thing that I've used to do is like if you just carry on a box and you hit it on and it doesn't really do something, or it might do something too subtly for its own good, or it might just compromise the basic guitar and amp tone. Because for me, especially now that I've been around a bit longer, you kind of have to have the guitar and amp be able to do its thing on its own, and everything else is extracurricular. And certainly there's a time and place where you can add like shimmer sounds or crystal reverbs and things like that, and they're always very fun to activate, but you have to have that basic fundamental sound together.
Now, you're a music educator. Is this something you try to help others understand who are just learning?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I try to do with my students is I think the best trait of an educator is you have to try to find what they want to do, because my students might not necessarily be in it for whatever reason I am. I have also quite a few older students, so it's like a serious hobby for them. So it's about trying to give what you know, also hear from their perspective, because, I'm still an ongoing process as far as my own development musically is
And you
concerned.
always will be.
Oh, I always will be.
That's
I
one of the
intend to
cool
be.
things about this.
That's, it's the one thing that you never should stop learning, and there's always an opportunity that you can glean something different perspective-wise from somebody else, especially in the world
Definitely.
of music. So,
Now, what kind of stuff are you teaching in these classes? Is it mostly just how to play an instrument? Is it how to get gigs? What do you really help
it
these
varies.
guys understand?
So the one thing that I'm really grateful in hindsight for KU was keyboard is mandatory, and it's actually, especially for a guitarist, a really useful tool to have, because even though guitar is always really enjoyable to play, it can lend itself to certain positions, and there's a certain vocabulary with guitar that we should all be aware of. But at the same time, that's why I think guitar players occasionally has a stigma that it's very like cliched, or it's too 20th century still, and there's a lot that you can do with a guitar. And even though in this lifetime I'm certainly not going to be able like Hurwitz on piano or something like that, but it is a useful tool for writing and also understanding music, because all the notes are right there for you in piano and guitar. You've got 6 strings that are usually tuned kind of unusually, and I'm not talking about open tunings or scordatura or anything like that. That's one thing that's useful for it. You can apply certain things to guitar, even though there's no real resources on how to do it, like how to transfer piano information to guitar, which is sort of, again, one of those things that is kind of helps you learn a little bit, because you're not locked into standard guitar positions and things like that, even though you probably should learn them.
With most things, especially with creative fields, it's best to learn the set rules before you break those rules.
Yep.
Like they say a lot with screenwriting is, okay, well, you can go with a 3-act structure. You don't have to, but we recommend you learn that, so when you break the rules, you understand what you're breaking and why you're breaking it.
Oh yeah, it's like what Bird said. Or Charlie Parker, anybody who knows
Bird.
him, you should know him, because he was the GOAT, and if we can say that.
And he never recorded for a major label.
Quite so. Another reason.
Yeah, another avant-garde guy. I mean, he had a lot of personal issues with drugs, and I think that's what mostly kept him from that, because when he started getting really bad, he would pawn his instrument.
Yeah.
Or the instruments of other bandmates or fellow musicians.
Oh,
So,
yeah. He was. Yeah, there's that story. I mean, even though I am not a fan of the Ken Burton series, because I think it just part of the reason of what we were talking about earlier.
It's very long-winded. It's very corporate.
Oh,
lens.
it is so corporate lens.
I love Louis. He's probably one of my favorite musicians of all time. Definitely is one of my favorite musicians of all time, but they definitely spend way too much time on Louis Armstrong.
He has his place, but it's like they overemphasize, and then they just drew the line at 1967, I think it was. I think there was that story where Jackie McLean was talking about how Bird pawned his horn after a gig.
In the cab.
Well, I mean,
there's a few stories like that. It's not the only one.
It's
a shame. But yeah, he was truly avant-garde for his time. And I mean, they still have Birdland in New York City. It's in a different location now.
Yeah, I think,
and most people probably don't even know why it's called Birdland at this point. Because who the hell knows about jazz in modern American society?
The thing about jazz is it's also taught very incorrectly, I feel, because the standards are great, but a lot of the time people just draw the line in sand at 1970. They won't really discuss free playing like Ornette Coleman or Sun Ra
or soul jazz.
Yeah, and even the newer stuff, even though some of the newer jazz has become a little too postmodern.
It's too
great.
it's too technical for me.
It's too technical, and it's also something you don't even remember.
Yeah.
Like
it's
sorry
impressive.
to burst bubbles, anybody, but any Jacob Collier fans, I respect what he does, but it's like I can't remember a song afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, he's great to listen to, but it's like I can't honestly remember anything.
Yeah, I find, with that genre, I find myself more and more not just going for traditional jazz, but also a lot of the brass bands, which it's interesting. That's kind of like what has overtaken a lot of the New Orleans culture now is the brass. It's always been there.
Like Snarky Puppy?
No, like Hot 8 brass band and To Be Continued brass bands. One of the musicians down there said that now most of the traditional jazz bands in New Orleans are white guys or white people in general, and most of the brass bands are black folks. So that's kind of like what they've moved on to because, jazz hasn't been popular music in the United States for 100 years.
Yeah.
Nearly. Since maybe the 1940s, if you want to count that.
Before bebop really kicked off.
But as soon as that happened, that's because as soon as you started to get towards rock and roll, nope.
Mm-hmm.
No, jazz was no longer, and since rock and roll, jazz hasn't been anywhere near popular music.
Or in the end, only time it's been close is when it has been permutated with rock or different other things. That's when it was kind of, even though we are getting into the whole Wynton Marsalis's What is Jazz discography, which I've got zero time for.
Well, but it's...
unless it's anyone else besides Wynton Marsalis.
Yeah, well, that's in a pretty iconic jazz family, though, so...
He is, Branford's great in his own way, and, of course, he played with Sting on his solo records. So,
and, of course, Herbie Hancock.
Yes.
Rocket.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those crossovers. Every now and then there's one. Nas actually had Al Jarreau on a song a couple years back.
Oh, yeah.
Which was cool. But yeah, you don't unfortunately hear a lot of jazz these days.
Yeah, so that's sort of how I approach. I know that got a bit off track a little bit.
That's all right. That's how conversation goes.
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
It's not a structured talk.
Yeah. And sort of that is a bit of approach to how I also work in S.R.G. because in addition to the being, I guess, front person by default, singing with me was something that I only started paying attention to recently because as my first guitar teacher, Roman used to say when I was starting to sit in and do gigs back in like 07 or 08 as like a pickup player for blues groups and I wasn't really sure about doing vocals. He says, "What if your singer quits on you?" And I remember it very vividly and I was just thinking, okay. And
that's said by someone who's experienced that exact thing.
Oh, Roman has experienced a lot, and he's
definitely a wealth of knowledge. That guy.
Oh yes, he is. And so I've held on to that thought a little bit. And when S.R.G. first started, just because the previous group I was in, the singer had basically thrown out the drummer, the first female co-singer, and myself, and we were due to play a gig that day for weird reasons. I don't quite know why. And it was like, I know the song lyrics, so I guess I'll take a crack at it. And I thought, okay, this will just be easy. And then I had to learn in 2019 the hard way where like I was really winded vocally after one set.
Yeah. But this is an important point for leadership in general, is if you're going to be a leader, you need to be able to jump in any position.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes.
And you should also be able to sing what you play.
And I'm not just talking about creatively. I mean, anything you do. You run a business. I mean, you have to be able to jump in these positions. Otherwise, what? You have no singer that night.
Yeah, I mean, and instrumentals only go so far. It depends on the musician.
Especially when someone's expecting something very specific or different from that.
Oh, quite so, quite so.
So let me ask you this, because your band is so multifaceted and you play in a range of music venues and spaces. Can you tell me about the spaces you play in? Like, what kind of places does S.R.G. play at?
So we play at a variety of different venues, like the F&A Grog House in Bethlehem. We play Pearly Bakers in Easton, which again are surprisingly good for bands to do originals in. So with the right sales pitch, because there are a couple things you still have to do, especially for the Grog House, because it is a college bar. But I think the younger people that come in there are a little more receptive of
Original music.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't want to quite say it like that, but
It's funny. I was just looking at your list of shows, and I saw you played at a place called Murph's Hideaway up in Poconos.
oh, that's coming up in a few weeks.
Okay,
a
well,
few days actually.
a few days. I knew it was either you just played or it was coming up. It's funny. I was just up in the Poconos not even 2 weeks ago.
That's a good area for music. I'll get to that a little bit.
And I literally went there to eat, and I saw the stage. I saw a little stage. Have you been inside there before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
We played there once back in 23.
I'll say this: the food there was incredible. I love. It's like an Irish place.
Yeah, it is.
They have. I had the Irish chicken croquettes.
Yep.
Incredible. They had the like a pot roast sandwich. Oh my god, everything was so good.
Yeah.
And I was like, how random is that? I just had food from this place that is not anywhere near the valley, and here you're playing.
Yeah, and we also play up in that area quite a bit at Shawnee Craft Brewery, Lake Harmony Resort area. The Pine Ridge festivals are incredible to go to. That is basically an all-original set when we do those every so often. That's how I actually met my friend, reconnected with my friend Joey, who I knew from LVPA way back when.
And they have a bunch of bluegrass bands up at that festival.
Yeah, and it's a really good atmosphere.
I love me some good bluegrass, man.
Yeah.
True Americana.
Oh, yes, the Tony Rice stuff. Before Billy Strings, even though he's incredible at what he does, but it's, a bit of a dying art in certain respects, unfortunately. And also a few places in Jersey and a few places further south towards Philly. So anywhere within an hour's radius is a game for me, and it's a mixture of acoustic gigs and full band gigs.
What do you look for in a venue? Like, is there a certain kind of venue you seek out in general? Because it seems like you play in a lot of like bars and restaurants and festivals, and this weekend you're playing in an art gallery. Like, what is the ideal venue for you that you like playing as a regular gig?
Just one that lets us bring the drums in and lets us get away with a few artistic liberties here and there, and is relatively close to home, even though I don't mind travel, because that's how I can always get my album CD collection out, and I can just
connect to new people.
Yeah, connect to new people, because the one thing that about playing Shiny Craft Brewery is we met this one contact recently who... We've met a couple contacts there recently, actually, but there's one contact who said we can help get you set up in New York at this room, the Cutting Room. So we're in talks now to see what can come about of it. So, and the Shawnee Craft is only about 45 minutes from where I live in Bethlehem, so that's no skin as far as travel.
So I would assume part of this is just luck. You just happened to be there when that guy was there, and you made the connection. That's how so much of this works.
Oh yes, that's something that I couldn't give a course on how to
luck.
Make
how do you teach luck?
Networking.
Yeah, how do you teach luck? It's not
karma, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's that's a whole nother art form to itself.
I wish karma worked that way. Otherwise, if it did, the world would be a lot more even keel. Let's say that.
It can bite you. I've had some experiences recently where it really can hit you quite hard. So
is there an ideal venue? I know you just said the Shawnee. You said, what was it?
That's Shawnee Craft is always fun to play, because the thing about the Poconos is it's a big cross water where you get people from all over the world coming in, because it's like they're there for skis or whatever else, and
they're there for play.
Yeah, they're there for play.
They're passing through. Now, so how does that differ from the shows here in the Valley?
There's not quite as much travel. So
it's kind of the same audience.
In a way, Allentown, I think, is like we're the third biggest city in the Commonwealth, right?
Technically, yes.
But at the same time, we for some reason, we don't have quite as much of the busk or the passing throughs for some reason. I don't know why, or if it was always like this. But
do you have many places to play in Allentown?
Now that Bell Hall's gone, I think the only place we're gonna do is Blended, and it's fun to do every so often, but it could be happening for groups. But then again, it's just how things are set up.
What do you think Allentown needs in order to provide more venues for musicians like you?
I think we were talking about earlier, we need to get people who have the best interests of what the community really wants, instead of like hiring a group from out of state to play covers,
Yeah, exactly. You were saying
because there are a lot of really enjoyable up and coming groups that have certainly put in the time, and they deserve something like that for Beer Fest or Blues, Brews, and Barbecues. But it's like you were kind of talking about earlier. It's run by people who just want to go cha-ching and we'll get this band from out of state
Yeah.
or even out of the community. And some of them are still very good.
The way I described it was that the people in charge typically have their finger on the pulse of nothing. You know, the people who are picking what music acts to have at a certain event, I would hope they're involved with music or people performing music.
Few, if any of them are.
And it's like, I think they're so intent on just having this thing there, having the music there, that no one's going to really care what kind of music is. So if they got a band to come out, they did their job. And I think that's as far as it goes. And it's a lot more important than that, because it gets to a point when you stop supporting those creatives in an area, those creatives stop doing what they do or stop doing it there.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people say that's why I got out of the Valley, because
I hear that way too much, man.
And that's sad, because honestly, I would play, I like a good travel, but occasionally it's nice to just only travel 5 minutes to the Garage House.
Yeah,
'cause
for sure.
It's A, very close to home, B, it's a full band venue, and 3, you can pull a good amount of original music there without having any backlash as far as, you didn't play songs that they knew.
Yeah.
And there's different ways that we disguise it when we do like a full 3-band show live. There's like times you announce songs, times you don't announce songs. So that's just my know-how of what I've learned over these years.
When it seems like Bethlehem and Easton have done really good jobs at providing spaces for musicians. Now, do you think that people have just been trying to do it there longer, or are they just being more receptive to the actual needs?
I think they have better. I mean, I'm not terribly familiar with Easton's leadership. The only place we play in Easton with regularity is Pearly Baker's.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Oh, I love it there. It's
Mother's is fun too, right next door.
Yes, and a couple other places in Easton are vaguely coming to mind.
They have the Lafayette Bar. They have some jazz shows there in Easton.
They've also Lafayette Bar has also opened their doors to a few more contemporary. I mean, I don't want to say contemporary because they had Rubik's Cube over. And,
Yeah.
But
So
it's great. We're finally getting something that's artistically
a little off the wall.
Yes, which is what we need.
You need
valley.
those eccentrics out there.
We need those.
You need the Frank Zappas of the world. You need the Rubik's Cubes of the world. But those guys, like you said earlier, if Frank Zappa came out now, they're not booking him in downtown Allentown.
No way.
That's the problem I have right now, and I'm going to beat on my own city a little bit, but you know what? It needs it. And I know some people are excited about this Archer Music Hall coming, but I am not one of those people.
I didn't even know about it.
It's funny because they're building it. It's on Hamilton Street between 10th and 11th, and I saw somebody on a WFMZ article online on Facebook. I was cracking up about this. They're like, oh, finally, someone to give some competition to the arena. And it was like, it's owned by the same people that own the arena. What competition are they giving themselves? Now, what I got upset about is because I know a lot of musicians and I know a lot of artists in this area, and I ask questions about what they're involved in. And one of the questions I've asked people is, have these guys approached you about what to do for a music venue? Because they're essentially deciding what acts to bring in. And of course, they need, in a lot of cases, I'm hoping they'll need local bands to open up for those acts, right? Because it's only it's less than a 2,000 capacity venue for the main. You have mid-level bands at most, right?
Yeah.
And then so I was already mad about that. So they're creating a music venue, but they're not actually tapped in with the music community. Now, do you know of anyone that's been involved with that maybe I'm wrong?
Not as far as I know. I think even if they were to talk to people about it, it's probably people who are, quite honestly,
Cut
too
from that.
old and
Okay.
out of touch.
Okay,
with,
that's fair. That's fair.
The younger crowd, for one of a better term, because I don't think you can honestly ask somebody who's in their late 60s or early 70s as a musician, even though there are some excellent musicians.
I think that they should definitely be asked, but I don't think they should be the only ones. It should be a range.
And maybe some of those people who, if they are being asked, that's all they're pooling from.
Yeah. I think this is important because obviously, when you speak out against something, it automatically puts you in a position in the public eye where you're against that thing. I want to see my city do better. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to see it do better unless you hold people's feet to the fire. And the people whose feet have to be held to the fire are those in charge, are the ones who are making these decisions. The way I see it is they're making the exact same decision with the Archer Music Hall and their stupid boutique hotel right next door. It's just a smaller version of what they did with the arena. The arena didn't work. It's a part-time success at best, as so many have pointed out. Mm-hmm. Why are you doubling down on that? You already have 50-some vacant storefronts on Hamilton Street, and you're just doing the exact same thing again. right?
Quite so.
On a smaller level, that's all you can really say is the change is you're doing a smaller version of what you've already done. And now they haven't officially announced it yet, but I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen, and mark my words, they're going to bring in Live Nation to run that shit. Live Nation, who is under investigation by the Department of Justice for being a monopoly, for bad business practices, for ripping off musicians. They want Live Nation to come into our city, and you guys, that's your only option. Like, that's insanity to me. What are your thoughts on that in general? I'm curious. You're a musician, I'm not.
I don't think a lot of these people really would know anything good artistically, musically if they heard it. Sorry to offend anybody listening, but you got to get your ears out more. You actually have to, I don't know. Do the people who honestly run these organizations actually go out and see bands on their spare times on like Fridays and Saturdays at like the Fun House? I mean, just seriously, go there.
I can say they don't come out to the shows I go to. They don't come out to the shows that I host.
I know.
And I know the guy that is now responsible for the majority of development downtown, J.B. Riley, lives in Hamburg, PA. So I don't think they give a shit what's going on.
Seriously, and they probably don't go out to, in their West Sylvania bars.
It's unfortunately like so much else. It's a money game. This is what I'm proposing. Now, you've come out to our artist takeovers before, right? And what do you think of those?
I think they're great because then again, we have to build as many bridges, so to use the cliche, with everybody else. And it's also enjoyable for me because when I talk with other musicians, I hear how they approach it. So when those evenings come that I have off time, I can glean advice. I also give my perspective on things.
And it's cool.
So
it's not just
great.
Musicians. It's a range of...
Oh, thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
I was just about to say, I've met photographers there. I've met videographers there. So it's a superb idea that needs to be done more. And I know you do all you can, but...
We're trying, man. And, these meetups have come out. It's a culmination of so many conversations of artists in the area beating their head against the wall because they're like, I love what I do, I want to do it, but either like a musician like you, I want to book at this place, but they want me to play just covers. I want to play my song. I'm trying to get my music out there.
Like Rivals was like that. We're asked to do something for them recently, and it was fun to do. I'm glad I did it again, and they said next time more covers, and it's like, yeah, we'll see about that.
More covers. And this is what I was saying to you in the basement.
The thing is, like, we're opening up for a cover group. It's like,
well, and that's the thing, man. These cover bands,
boring.
It's painful. It's not even. I wish it was just boring. It's painful. I know artists. Maybe I'm just very lucky, but I know a lot of artists that do incredible stuff, right? And I want to see those guys have the opportunities. And instead, you're giving it to people that want to feel what it's like to be a rock star, but not even go through the process of creating anything. They want to live in the shoes of someone else. I get that you want to feel that, but that's not the most important thing in this situation to support and think about. It's about these artists who are creating, who are pouring out their hearts. I mean, you've played gigs for me out there on Hamilton Street where there's fucking nobody. There's nobody. And it's because we're getting money from City Center to activate it. Like, you just spent all this money to build this new stuff, and you think little old me and one or two solo musicians or a duo or a trio is going to bring in the crowds to Allentown. But then these venues we're booking you at, I have to fight like hell to make it anything but just covers. Okay, this is what we need. First of all, we need the world to not just be run like a business. Because when you do that, you only look at the world through a business lens. And everything else, if it's like money is time. No, it's not. Money is money, time is time. Money comes and goes. Time goes in one direction only. At least from our measurement of it, what we can do so far. And to me, time is the most precious resource. You cannot get that back. You can lose $10 and make $50 more that day. You can never get back the time you spent. To me, that's most important. And to think about the time that musicians and artists spend to hone their craft, to become great. Like, I read this thing about this graphic designer who met with a client at a bar. He gave her an idea for a logo that he wanted, just some basic ideas, and she sketched it out real quickly in less than 5 minutes on a cocktail napkin at a bar and gave it to him. And I forget what number she said. She's like $25,000. He goes, why would I give you $25,000 for 5 minutes of work? She's like, you're not paying me $25,000 for 5 minutes of work. You're paying me $25,000 for all the years it took me to be able to do that in 5 minutes.
Yes, that's the thing when you're dealing with venues who are booking and they say things like, first of all, the one thing that I really just shut down is like, do you have a following? It's like, Sure hope your bar does, pardon me. You can say what you want about paying a group, $600, which is just nothing of how musicians should be paid. But you're also paying for, all the years that they put in the 10,000 hours. Well, even though I never did it for the love of
all the
profit.
gear you had to go through till you found the right stuff, all the practice spaces you potentially had to pay for, all those practices in general. You weren't getting paid to practice.
Or what my parents invested that got...
Honestly, what I think we need is an artist union. I cannot find one in the United States. There was one about 100 years ago that was around for a few years and went kaput, is gone. We have no one kind of fighting for our rights. And one of the things that I've heard from especially musicians is there's kind of like a basic per person price for musicians that you aim to get for a gig, right? And that everyone kind of knows that, and at least people that gig regularly and know what they're doing. But then you'll have people that will come in and try to way undercut that, offsetting the entire local scene. Is that something you've experienced?
Like
you tell a place it's $500 for my 3-piece, but someone's like, we'll do it for $250. Now you can't get that place to come up to $500 again.
And that's why musicians are having such a hard time making a decent quality of life.
Some of them are doing it to themselves. So it's already hard enough for artists to survive because of people that don't understand what they're doing. But when artists make it harder for each other, I know some people think that unions are a dirty word or a bad thing. I don't. I think it's necessary. If we didn't have unions, they would still be able to lock you in at work and keep you there for 18 hours a day. They would still be able to have 6-year-olds working on the floor. But it's because unions get corrupt. And they ask for too much.
I was about to say that I think that at least what I've dealt with unions before, they've always been a little more problematic and usually very dishonest.
Well, it's
but
when
that might have been back in the day that they were.
When unions function like actual unions, it's great. It's when they become more like these fucking homeowners associations that should be doing the best for the greater good. But it's like, okay, well, we're in charge now, and you're going to do what we say. Like, I'm dealing with an HOA with my dad's estate who passed away last year, and it's a nightmare. These people are total heartless scumbags. They don't care. And there's nothing you could say to pull their heartstrings. They're in it for the money, and they don't care what you're going through. Yeah. We unexpectedly lost our father, and we've been trying to deal with the fallout from that. Wow. They couldn't give a shit less. And it's heartbreaking. It's like, where is your humanity?
Even like people in the Department of Education that I deal with, it's just like, we have to sort of try to claw through it, DERF or whatever. They don't care about the students at all.
How do you think we can make it better, at least for working musicians? Because that's the perspective you're coming from. In the Valley, because it's the area you're most familiar with right now, aside from the Poconos.
Yeah, we just need
Do we need more
better leadership.
Better leadership?
Need, especially in the people who are booking these venues, like in Allentown. And from what I know of Bethlehem, I guess they have to play the game a certain way, but they seem to have at least a better... I think those people probably listen to music, or they've gone out to hear groups or things like that. These people in Allentown, at least, I'm not really sure are actual connoisseurs of music.
They're not. So
that's going to be...
they're treating the music strictly like entertainment. They don't care about the artistic value behind
profit,
it.
They just want to go cha-ching.
It's their long con. That's what they're trying to do. They want people around their fancy, shiny new buildings to keep building more and to keep making money off of them. Mm-hmm. But that's not why we're here. That's not why we do what we do, right? You want to be supported as a creator.
I think Frank was saying something like that about how labels changed back in the the 60s.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The black and white interview in the 80s.
The guitar chomping executive who was like, I don't know if it's going to work, but let's see what happens. And then you have this guy that comes in and thinks he knows what they need and doesn't take any chances.
Yeah, we're at definitely the...
We're at the young executives.
Young executives are
who think they know what's up and are unwilling
I think that's
to.
Allentown for you right now.
Well, and you know what? I'm glad you're able to say that because I'm sure you hear a lot of musicians complaining about this stuff behind the scenes, right?
Oh yeah.
How many are vocal about this publicly though?
It's not going to do you any good necessarily to just rant about it on an online forum, but it is going to do you good to speak through the proper channels or say something in a certain way that could chip away at it. But at the same time, we are pretty ensconced with what we've got right now that it's probably not going to really change for a good couple of years. And, it's just kind of weird to think that we're almost halfway through the 2020s.
I know.
And
So do you think a lot
It's,
of musicians locally are afraid to speak out in, fear of retaliation of not getting gigs? Do you think that's part of it? Like what little we do get, we don't want to mess with? I know a lot of people say things to me behind the scenes, but they're reluctant to say things publicly.
At least in my dealings with the bureaucracy or whatever, I've never yet had an issue that was too problematic. But at the same time, it's just things that I'm aware of. And so it just sort of depends on who you're talking to and how you say it and how you come across, because that can honestly be a game changer. But as far as having a feasible solution to it, it's just going to be whoever's up and coming. When one thing we do see quite a lot is there's a lot of people who come and go from these positions, and the
high
chamber.
turnover rates. Yeah.
So hopefully somebody will eventually come in there who's heard something similar to what we're discussing, and they'll actually be able to implement real change as far as being able to get more experimental artists.
How do you have any message or maybe a step or two of how they can be more open to that? Like someone, say the Chamber of Commerce, or maybe just working for a local government who's booking these things for a festival. Because I love the Blues, Brews, and Barbecue Festival, but my problem with that is, from what I see, it's not people have anything to do with the blues.
Oh yeah,
and I'm sorry,
blues is so changed.
And the blues is that's deep culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, unless you have someone that's a part of that culture, you should not be hosting that event.
Or it can't really be considered blues anymore.
Exactly.
In the sense that, Albert King or Albert Collins or Elmore James were in their day, because, it's become so, even though it is the motion of a lot of American music, and even some of the most experimental people are linked to the blues in some way, shape, or form, whether they realize it or not. It's just this is sort of tying in what I was talking a little bit about with the cliched nature, because blues and guitar is unfortunately very, very commonplace, and you hear a lot of these blues bands go out and play, and there certainly are good players, but they don't really have the essence of it,
the connection with the culture,
and a lot of it is pretty rehashed.
Yeah, and I see the issue with that, but at the same time, that's like a band here, a band there. That's one thing, but I feel like when you have a festival, an event built around this culture, it's different. Like you have kind of an obligation to live up to that, because you're telling people this is the real deal. You're inviting people in. Right? Like you're building, essentially what I see happening here in the city of Allentown with an event like Blues, Brews, and Barbecue is it's a Chamber of Commerce event. It's strictly about the tourism. It's just trying to get people to come in. And it's like, well, I feel you're kind of exploiting this culture, and maybe people are just so numb to it because the blues were so distant from the roots of country blues. That's real country music.
Like Blind Lemon Jefferson, that is...
Yeah, if you hear what country music used to be... Even in the 60s and 70s, I mean, there's that great video resurfacing right now. If anybody is listening and wants to check it out, it's with Chris Christopherson and Willie Nelson, and it's their protest music about the government, and it's almost super, super leftist, which is now country music is the exact opposite side of things. It's how did this music swing so much in the other direction? And it's not even it doesn't even sound the same.
I guess location has to do with it.
I guess it's who is involved with it. When something even like rap and hip hop.
I mean, that
became pop. That's a new pop music now.
The one thing that is sort of similar is back in the day you had the race records where people were lights and were recording the early bluesmen and selling them as to the black market as basically
even jazz.
Oh yeah, that's part of that as well. And you see the same thing kind of day with a lot of hip hop artists, or the biggest names are. Yeah. The thing about hip hop is there's a lot of good stuff out there, but it's again so buried, and you hear a lot of this. It's
underground.
Deal.
You're not most of the really good hip hop you're not going to hear commercially.
It's just timing,
and luck, just like we said before.
There's
luck.
There's no way to teach it or way to exude it. It's just you just put out something as a musician, and you hope that it gets a good splash, and you just hope that it connects with a lot of people. I mean, forget the whole profit deal.
Sure,
because that you put out music because you can't do anything but it. Or at least that's what I do.
I think about creativity a lot. What does the creative process look like for you? Like, how do you start writing a song or start writing an album? Is it always the same?
Oh, no, it's different. So with this latest record, I did send you that one track earlier, which we recorded at Shard Sound. I did a lot of composition courses in college, and considering I've put out 4 albums worth of music, that's 40 songs, and as well as a few outtakes here and there, because some things make albums, some things don't, for a variety of reasons. But I always think that when I'm most creative is when I'm doing something that is not second nature to me. Because as a songwriter, you've only got so many different ways that you can resolve chords, and that's what you call cadences, and there are various different ways you can go about it. The saying is, like, most people have the same 5 songs that they write over and over again, but you do eventually get to some composers or songwriters like Herbie Hancock, for instance. King Gizzard also have a wide net. Zappa, to a degree, Todd Rundgren, or the guys from XTC, where they can cover a lot of different ways of composing styles. Like
Duke Ellington.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
The Duke.
Or Billy Strayhorn, depending on who you believe really wrote what. The thing is, all these song devices, all these resolutions, all these extensions, these are just color and ways that you can go about resolving a song. And it can depend on how you started off. It can depend on what instrument you're writing on. The guitar can depend on how it's tuned. You know, there's always something else you can do with just the slightest addition, and you can vary it. And for this record that we're just about to finish, I had a bit of a writer's block where I just thought everything just sounded the same, and that partially becomes just from ear fatigue, and you just do it enough that you sort of can hear changes of how they would resolve. So in hindsight, this will be a good way of how I've gotten through my own writer's block, even though it's just one thing you can't get back is time, but occasionally you do need, or one needs to have those sorts of periods.
That's a process. It's part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think anyone seriously thought that they could become or achieve the sound that they heard artistically in their own mind without suffering for their art. It's just, are you just wasting your time with doing the same thing over and over again, which is the definition of insanity.
And those are important questions you have to ask. They are. And, you know, there's a great saying that no piece of art is ever complete. You have to know when to walk away from it.
That's Da Vinci for you.
Yes. And so did you do anything specific for this writer's block, or did you just power through it?
Combination of the two. I actually just stopped writing for like a good month or two, and I just figured I'm just going to, because I had a few other things going on, as well as rebranding this iteration of S.R.G. So
do you tend to stay away from music at that point? Yeah, I just decided.
I mean, I was still playing, but
like, were you in your downtime? Were you like listening to less music?
Yes, listening to less music. And when I did listen to music, I would listen to something different than what I was used to. So I did other things. I read more, and
go for any walks.
Oh, I always go for walks. I go down to Sand Island, where I live in Bethlehem, all the time. That's always my recharge. I also go to the Parkway when I'm here in Allentown or Trexler Park, so that's always part of my
very nice.
I always love those just because it's like totally away from any distractions. It's in nature, and
the park system is
that's one of the things Allentown has that is something
that
unique,
that is one of the
Trexler,
great things. Yep, the park system.
We got Jordan, and we got the Parkway.
Yeah, well, we would if we did everything the way we did our park system, we would still be a world-class city, but now we're limping along. I mean, I'm going to stick it out for the long haul for Allentown, but right now it's a little tough, and I want to make it easier for musicians. Like, do you see, like, are there specific musicians out there or artists in general you see that are amazing, but, like, maybe not getting the support or opportunities that they need?
I think Rubik's Cube can definitely be featured at a few more of these festivals.
Nice, okay.
They have a very unique way with their songwriting approach that is very creative and doesn't very much sound like anything else.
And in their own way, they're very prolific, too.
They're quite prolific, indeed. And I'm trying to think of a few other ones that come to mind. Original groups, though, that's the criteria that I'm thinking of here. Antarctica, I also enjoy hearing. I've never played
from Antarctica.
Yes, I've never quite
amazing.
heard them, but I've always heard them quite so.
Now, do you think that maybe they just need more venues or places that get what they're doing? you think it's a part of it?
You also got to try to test the waters yourself. You know, I mean, it's a combination of you have leadership that gets the process, but you also sort of have to feel things out for yourself, you know? So it's a two-way thing. You have to put yourself out there. You also hope you're fortunate enough that somebody eventually might get it.
You gotta try. I mean, you can't go out there depending on other people. You know, I think for artists, a lot of it is creating opportunities for yourself. But I think, you know, you can only do that when there's not even venues and stuff like that. You know, it's to say, okay, I'm going to create opportunities for myself in the way of starting a venue. That is super expensive, super time consuming. And if you're an artist, like the first 5-6 years of running the Alternative Gallery, I'm a filmmaker. I didn't think about making films. I didn't engage in making any films. I wasn't myself in those years because I didn't do the thing that I was meant to do more than anything else on this planet, was be my own artist, make my own art. And yeah, okay, it's benefited me, like artists along the way, but at great personal cost. And that's not something you can really encourage others to do. And that's kind of why we're trying to shake the cages of people that are in charge here and be like, wake up, we need you. We need you to do this. You're already building a music venue. Build it for those that need it. This is who need it. This is why they need it. This is how it needs to be utilized. When you're spending resources creating these spaces without even involving the people it's supposed to be there for, that's just absurd. Like, why even bother? You know, I am a big believer in movement in any direction is not progress. People think because they drive down a street and it looks different than it did last year, that's somehow progress. That's not progress. Forward is progress.
Yeah.
You know, going in circles is not progress. And I think that's what we fail to see is we're so appeased by the physical changing of things that, oh, well, they built this new thing, so it must be working right. No, I think we would have been better off having some of these older buildings, letting them be run by people that don't have money.
Yeah, especially like some of the older architecture is a lot more appealing than like the newer buildings. Like I think you've seen those memes that come up recently of like a building in I don't know, the Czech Republic where they showed what it looked like before and then they modernized it and they just totally took out the character.
Yeah, well, and you know, and developers will always say, "Oh, because it's cheaper this way." I don't fucking care how expensive it is. That's your problem, not ours. And
that is not a real.
And
that's just a corporate sort of deal.
Correct. And we have to acknowledge here that architecture literally shapes our environment, which shapes how we feel and interact with each other or not interact with each other. Like there are blocks that are too long that people don't want to walk down. Those are dead blocks. Nobody wants to do anything there. And those are typically blocks with higher crime because there's less watchful eyes.
Yeah.
So it's like we need these things happening here. I don't know, like you said, I don't think it's going to change in the next couple of years. I think we're kind of stuck, and
but you know, we can chip away at it
because even things like Allentown Arts Fest, which I so desperately want to bring back, it's so incredibly expensive. We rely on corporate sponsors to do it because it's so expensive. I'm not going to charge people to get into that festival because I know some of the people in Allentown, what position they're in, even if it's just a few bucks, they can't afford to get in. I don't want to exclude them. That changes the whole community aspect of what I want that festival to be. And maybe there's some major grant we can get for it. But again, we're volunteers here just trying to keep our heads above water. To have a full grant writing team would maybe change that to get those big grants, but we don't. So we rely on the corporations.
Right.
They wanted us to move the festival down to Hamilton Street from Cedar Beach. And it's like, come on, man. That's not what this festival is about. That's not where this festival is where it's supposed to be. And I know especially especially artists, visual artists, they do so well at Arts Fest. There are vendors who've done it for decades, and that's the best they've ever done in life, vending. And it's like now I can't provide opportunities because the corporations don't understand or like what we do. And it's crazy to me because so many artists could benefit if they did. What would you say to try to change something like that? Like, how do we make these guys understand?
I guess pay attention to the primary process when you have people running for office in the local districts and just make sure we really... but then again, you never know once people are in power how they're going to turn out. But, you know, especially
they
for Allentown.
They can put on the song and dance.
Yeah, and, you know, that's unfortunately very commonplace when people get in office and then they backtrack on what they said they were going to do or how they're going to go about it. And I guess for Allentown, when the next time comes, it's time to evaluate the options and just choose carefully and cast the ballot when the time comes.
I do believe that Allentown could be a place of real art and culture. It has all the makings of it, you know?
It does, yeah.
And now for those out there who might want to jump into becoming a musician, what do you recommend they do?
Just do it for the love of doing it. Do it because you can't do anything else. Don't do it for the profit. Don't do it for what you think the supposed perks are going to be. Try to continuously improve. Try to hang out with people who have a different set of attributes than you that might be a little more different than yours, because the variety is the spice saying is certainly true for music. Talk to as many of your fellow musicians as you can to glean their perspective on what they do, and keep an open mind. And
so it sounds like community is a very important
community
point.
is. I mean, try to keep your enemies list as short as possible. There's nothing that. Occasionally, we all have fallout in the music world, and
well, I think artists.
You got to try to limit it.
I think artists are temperamental people. I think that's what it is.
They can be, yeah. I mean, the trick is just to try to limit it, because bad news travels fast, and
people
you don't want bad news about you.
People love their drama, man.
Oh yeah, well. When you don't have a night off and there's another group playing, try to go see them, because you got to support your fellow musicians. Because I think that part of the reason we had a pretty good turnout for Roman was because he's given a lot of people to the community, even though it's just pitiful how we have to have a benefit concert to raise.
No, that's an important
funds.
thing I was thinking about earlier, man.
It was still a great experience to participate in.
But it's like, it's not just a shame that we want to support one of our own who's not getting support. Like, Roman should never be in that position to need to ask friendly musicians to throw a show to pay for medical bills.
I mean, and this is Parkinson's is just it's really affecting him. That's just something that is luck of the draw, and
unfortunately. Well, and this is why I bring up certain issues here, because I think artists are in a unique position to help guide people towards the important things in life. I think in American society, so many people feel hopeless in a way that no matter what they do or say or how they vote, it's not going to change anything. That the game is rigged, that everything's already decided, and maybe in some cases that is true. And we'll never really know, but I don't think we should stop trying, because the people that maybe are rigging the game, that's what they want. They want us to not try. And I think if people love what we do, what we create, and we have an important message that they agree with, we can help them achieve what is actually greater for the betterment of all. And again, like something like healthcare, man, everyone should have that. We're supposed to be the richest nation in the history of this planet, and you got to throw a benefit show for an artist that's suffering from some pretty serious shit.
Parkinson's is much more lethal than I gave it credit for. I thought you might have just like a couple tremors. I didn't realize it affects your whole speaking.
Everything. I mean, it's really...
It shows how naive I was, but it's like...
Well, I hope he hangs in there, man, because he's a great guy.
He is, and he's only like in his mid-60s.
Yeah,
but he's kind of... he still teaches privately a little bit, but I guess he's done playing shows. And that's sad because, you're still relatively young. Yeah. You should have at least another 20 years to
Well, I think
at some level.
I really believe that if, people work together, we can make anything happen.
Yeah.
And there's no reason we can't get health care for everybody. There's no reason we can't make community centers for those that need it and more venues that understand what we're trying to do. But I think that people...
Or at least make healthcare cheaper, for the love of God.
Well, I'll tell you this,
the sad
man.
thing is the proceeds that we raise would probably have been attributed in like 3
I got
days
some
in a hospital
bad
space.
news for you, my friend. Okay. The United States government spends more money on healthcare now than they would if we actually had universal healthcare. It's such an inefficient and broken system that literally if we switched over, we would save it's like $5 trillion plus in the next decade.
Oh, how interesting.
And we would all have not just healthcare, but it would include eyes, it includes skincare, dental, hearing, for less money than what we're paying now. When I hear stuff like that, Everybody should be like raging out about that and demand change. And I think artists have an important role in that. Some artists just want to create and don't want to go any further. I get that. But I think artists are in a unique position to get the message out, to get the word out. That's part of what I want this to be. It's really up to us. Because all the issues we talk about in the Valley, no one's coming to help us. You realize that, right?
Oh, yeah, I know that.
No one's going to come and create the ideal venue unless one of us has the money to do it, we convince someone with the money to do it, or we really put people's feet to the fire. Like, we're not going to support your shit till you give us what we need.
It's like if somebody would actually stand up to Spotify and have them pay us what we deserve. Like, if you took a handful of
speaking on
really prolific musicians, like it maybe Sting, Beyonce... And if you had like a group of people, not just like one person pulling off their music and saying, we're not going to...
Let's start it right now. Now. Let's start it, okay?
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm going to give one more example before we go any further. Snoop Dogg last year, maybe it was earlier this year, 1 billion streams on Spotify. Did you hear about this?
I believe it. I heard it.
Okay, he got 1 billion streams.
Yes.
How much do you think Spotify paid out for 1 billion streams?
Probably in the 5 figures.
$45,000.
Close enough.
$45,000 for 1 billion streams.
45000,
All right,
right?
Let's start. You're on Spotify now, right?
Yeah.
Is that where the majority of your streams come from?
Partially that and YouTube, yeah.
And you do physical media?
You mean
CDs?
Yes.
CDs. And I imagine that's something you have interest in keep doing moving forward, doing physical media?
Yeah, I mean, I want to keep physical media alive. I've always preferred LPs, and that's why I always call them albums, just because I think the artwork is better for starters. I think the idea of having size is better, and the fact that you had 45 minutes or so.
You want people to take in the full project as opposed to skipping around. And when you make it a little harder to skip around, people are more likely to stay.
That's why
for the
we
whole
have
thing.
Exactly.
Well, and this is the thing. Like, would you be willing to leave Spotify?
The thing is, maybe.
My podcast,
the sound quality is not particularly good on there.
Fuck that. Who cares about that? That is an important point, but that's that's the most important point. It's how it's changed everything, not for the better, because now people have gotten so used to and comfortable with streaming. They're not buying CDs. They're not buying records. Not like they used to, at least. And now musicians who already weren't getting their cut of what they should have been getting, now they're really getting nothing. And I am seeing more and more, especially with people using DistroKid, how now they have to... Now it's costing artists money just to have their stuff out there for free. A lot of musicians I'm talking to now are experiencing this.
I mean, DistroKid honestly has the best of... those platforms, because it's just you pay $20 a year, even though we shouldn't have to be doing that, and you can upload anything to your whim's content.
And that's pretty cheap, $20 a year, but still,
you in a perfect sense of the world, we would not have.
But you're paying $20 a year for people to use your music for free. That's just insane.
I know,
it's insane.
It's really.
But everyone just kind of accepts it, and we got to change it, man. We have to change it. So you think it's going to take some major names in the music world?
I think so. If you had, some of the more prolific streamers who just pulled their music off and said...
For this reason explicitly. Not because of the Joe Rogan shit, always giving false information. When that was going around, I'm like, okay, fine, take your stuff off because Joe Rogan's an idiot.
Yeah, well...
But why aren't you taking it down because of unfair practices? There was a major report that happened that now apparently the Department of Justice... is very likely going after Spotify next for monopolizing the industry.
Hopefully we'll have some good news.
But yet the founder of Spotify is worth like $5 billion.
And he can pay us what we deserve just for putting it out there. But he won't care.
Spotify is in the red, and it's always been in the red, and that's because they're in it for the long game, which I don't think they're going to last. I just don't.
I'd be okay.
I don't.
I mean, I hope you're correct, because...
But is this a normal conversation you have with artists about Spotify, about how they feel about it?
I think most people honestly know that Spotify is dubious in how much they pay musicians, but no one's going to talk about it because they don't want to rock the boat or...
Fuck that boat.
And,
that boat needs to be
we
sunk.
got to say it.
That boat needs to be sunk. If everyone knows it sucks, why do they...
I mean, it's like...
My podcast is not on Spotify.
Let's just entertain this bit. audio quality is just so lo-fi. Like I've heard things on YouTube, for the love of God, that sound better quality.
But
in
you're
my
a
ears than
musician.
Spotify.
Most people don't care about that.
True.
They want it. It's easy. And why they have access to all this music, I'm telling you, a lot of people aren't even paying a subscription. They're going to deal with the stupid commercials.
It's sort of like, why do people go to fast food joints on a regular basis, even though they know it sucks and they know it's bad for them, but it's like cheap and convenient, and that's all they can do.
Last night was WrestleMania, and I watched WrestleMania, and I'm like, okay, trash TV. I'm going to eat some junk food. That's a good time for it.
Yeah, but that's not a daily thing.
Well, exactly. But I knew what I was doing. I wasn't like, this is my routine now. I'm going to just give up real food and just eat McDonald's all the time. Well, not that I had McDonald's last night, which I did not. But that's the thing. And it's like, no, everyone realizes that Spotify sucks, but no one's doing anything about it.
Yeah, I think now that I've just heard, I'm gonna deactivate my own personal Spotify use after this.
And I'm shooting myself in the foot because, like, we never put the podcast on Spotify because I have very, obviously, as you could tell, very deep resentments towards the platform and deep resentment towards those that think it's how things should be going. Oh, it's progress. People that say you have like an old way of thinking by wanting physical media over streaming, they're missing the point entirely. It's not about new versus old. It's about what works and what doesn't work. I mean, having access to music long term is what's important. You see how easy anything can be pulled off a streamer. To me, that's the most important thing, aside from artists being supported with what they do. Because the thing is with the artists, they're lucky enough to have found what they love in life, but it's like life keeps them from doing it because no one either gets it or supports them, or they just suck at business. So they got to work some bullshit job and do music on the side, which is what they want to be doing. And now that is ever harder because of the system we're sticking them in.
I think the thing about music was before the industry was really a thing, you had maybe a fewer amount of musicians who were, for one of the better term, professionals. Then you had the 60s, and then it obviously exploded to where a lot of people were doing it, and now we're at a position where it could shrink to a very small minority again, and that's maybe sad because you think of all the people out there who are really putting away at it. Who, our drummer said that his dad said recently the other day, the best musicians out there are the one no one hears about, and that's sad because
I think it's how it goes a lot, man. Yeah,
there's
well, this is why I love home recording. Because it makes these things accessible to people.
True.
But it's almost like that same technology is making it harder for people to find those musicians. It's like someone once described it as a phone book. Like, just putting your music on the internet is like being in a phone book, right?
Yeah.
Just because you're in the phone book means nothing. People have to know to look for you. And that's the problem.
Quite so.
It goes back to the dead internet theory where it's almost like maybe it's being too controlled by algorithms, and people can't find the stuff that's really worthwhile. I don't know.
The bots and the algorithms. Well, it could go either way because, like our singer was saying, we should just buy bots on Spotify. And even though Natalie's a wonderful addition, it's like, yeah, but that could bite us either way because, what depends?
Don't be a part of that problem.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's what I was
You're
saying.
doing it the right way. You're gigging. You're going out and playing different areas. You're playing different types of venues. That's the way to do it. And unfortunately, it's a slow grind. Unless there's some amazing stroke of luck, which so few will ever experience, don't bank on it. Don't even hope for it. The odds are so low against it that you might as well pretend it's not even possible. And if it does happen, it's like, holy shit, this is amazing. But unfortunately, it's a grind. And I think it makes it easier if there's a community working together. And you said something super important before about musicians coming out to other people's shows. And that's one of my big complaints with Lehigh Valley. Is that I see a lot of bands that they're not having a gig that night and their buddies are playing and they're not there. That's a huge problem. That's a huge, huge, huge problem. And not just for musicians, but if we're talking about music, if you're in a band and you're not playing that night, go and see music if you can. If you want people to come out to your show, you got to go out to theirs.
Yeah.
Same thing with artists.
And it's great to hear somebody else play for it change. Like my friend, Eric Santana, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I love Eric.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Oh, he is indeed. So I had one show canceled. I think it was like couple of months ago, and he was playing at the Wooden Match, and I just went down and saw him. And not that I was trying to get a gig there, but it's like, okay, I'll finally hear what he's saying about this sort of processors, and it was just cool to hear and see how other people do it. And but yeah, when those things come, I'm sure there's somebody that close by that you don't have an issue with that you can just go down and see, because you never know. Heaven forbid that we have to throw benefit concerts in the 2050s or whatever.
Yeah, and
60s.
that's the thing too. Like, you just also touched upon something else where you said that you weren't interested in trying to book gigs there. Now, sometimes that might be the only reason somebody does go out. Oh, well, I'm interested in maybe playing there. I want to go see what it's all about and maybe make a contact.
The people that I know who've done that aren't.
You got to drop the self-serving shit. That's not how you build community. It's really not.
You don't go out for that.
Like, I'm not going to say names here, but being as someone that runs an art gallery, I've had people that run other galleries that will only come here and be open to me and say, oh, well, I want to come see if there's anyone I might want to show. No, you're here for the wrong reasons then, man. You should be supporting the art first, and if something strikes you, naturally want to bring that in. But when that's your sole thought of why you want to come here, that's just dirty, man.
Yeah.
That's fucking dirty. When I go out somewhere, I'm not trying to do it for an intention. I try to be the purest form of artist, and it's like, I just want to support people doing cool stuff. And I don't think there's enough of that right now, because we're all so convinced it's this rat race money game, and we got to have more dollars than the next guy or more views than the next guy. Again, for artists, create selfishly. Create for yourself first. Who cares what anyone else thinks? If people connect with your stuff, great. And if you can make your full-time living off of that, even better. But at the very least, start by being selfish about doing what you love and finding others that like it for those similar reasons. And if you see someone doing it for maybe not great reasons, you don't have to call them out online, but maybe pull them aside and be like, dude, this is not what we need to build a strong community. We need us having each other's backs for real reasons. Because if it's not real reasons, you don't really have my back.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think that's a big problem we have right now, is so many of us who are in this together somehow got tricked into thinking we're against one another. What we're able to accomplish here, we should help people in other places do the same thing. And then you don't have just a valley to rely on. You have all these other outlets to send people out. Because I'm sure as much as you love going only 5 minutes to a gig, you would love to go on a tour, right?
Yeah. Travel is always fun. You get to see different cultures, different places, different people, and I mean, it's not just like a vacation sightseeing show, because we all know it's
try to squeeze that in if you can, but usually it's work.
But it's always at least the times I've been on tour, it's always really enjoyable to get out to the different areas and see how different people live, and it's always enjoyable.
Yeah,
that whole travel and music, because especially in Europe, I've always found that to be they're a lot more appreciative than they are here in the States.
Yeah, culture in general, man. Culture in general. Culture is, somebody said it. I was talking to somebody at the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts recently about that, and he said, it's funny. I have a friend in France who said that they wish that the government would put more money towards medical research, because so much of it goes to culture. So it's like they're like so in on culture that they don't put as much in other things, which I think is funny. Because America is definitely not that.
Nah, I mean, Europe has a much healthier appreciation of live music than
absolutely
we do by a
million
miles and a half.
That's a whole podcast episode. That's a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly tell you, I've had the good fortune to be able to tour Italy with the KU Jazz Band in the spring break of 2013 for about 2 weeks or something like that. You'd be playing these bars, and the people were just so much more engaged musically than over here. And that was 2013. Imagine how much more difference it's become, but I don't know what is up with especially like the Lehigh Valley is sort of like a microcosm of America's appreciation of live music as a whole. Maybe it's different in some other communities, but at least here, and I think for a good amount of a lot of the other heartland places, we're basically wallpaper musically. You know? Well, musicians are wallpaper, rather.
I think if we do some of the things we talked about in this chat here, we can make it more so that artists can do what they want to do in the way they need to, I think. And we're going to have to wrap it up, unfortunately.
So much fun, though.
Yeah,
we should
there's
definitely do something like this again.
So many things we could talk about.
Regardless.
Let's do this. Let's organize an artist roundtable with some musicians so we could talk about some of the issues. Not just a bitch fest. You got to bitch a little bit, but let's actually build something.
Yeah, let's have solutions or propose solutions, because we can say
not
this,
just propose.
there, the other,
let's try something. And if we fail, we fail. We do it differently.
We tried
that. Exactly, but let's put together a group of people. Let's talk about the issues. Let's find some solutions and actually work on those things, even if it's just like the artist takeovers. And that's one of the ways I'm trying to fix things is by doing these artist takeovers.
Whenever it fits in my schedule and I'm free, I will be there next.
Awesome, man.
I was thinking about that the other day. It's like, hey, is there going to be an artist takeover? Because I just love to come hang out and see what everyone else is up to. Because last one, I think that was in November. That was pretty well attended, if I remember.
Yeah, and that was one of the smaller ones too, believe it or not. And it was still a great turnout.
I think there was about 25 people, give or take. Some.
Yeah, because I think you came closer to the end, right?
Yeah, something like that. It feels like it's been a while back.
I mean, some of the ones we had, like the 100 artists, it was crazy.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So once again, we've been chatting with Colin Wolf, local musician and music educator from the Lehigh Valley. Colin fronts the band Smooth Retsina Glow as both singer and guitar player. You can check out their music by going to smoothretsinaglow.com. And this weekend, Colin hosts as well as performs in a show here at the Alternative Gallery on Saturday, April 13th, featuring Fysics, Roy and the Secret People, Cnidarian, and Smooth Retsina Glow. That show again is Saturday, April 13th at 6 p.m., all ages show. Colin, thank you so much for a very colorful chat. I know we got into some controversial topics, but that's how you fix the problems, my friend. And we're going to fix them coming up next time, man. I promise
we are.
Thank you very much, man. And if you're enjoying the Art Bazaar podcast, please help us grow by liking and subscribing to the podcast. We want to reach a worldwide audience to help bring attention to all the amazing creators and unique folks we bring on. They certainly deserve it. And that's all for now. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time on Art Bazaar.